Welcome back, everyone. If you're listening to this, you are what we like to call the learner.
Absolutely. Insanely curious, always looking for the underlying patterns.
Right, and you want the real insights without, drowning in information overload. I'll be your host today, leading the charge.
And I'll be your resident expert, bringing the deep research to the table.
And today we are taking a deep dive into a topic that, honestly, usually comes fully loaded with a massive amount of heavy, guilt-ridden baggage.
Oh, for sure. The baggage is very real.
We're talking about spiritual disciplines. And our source material today is this really extensive, deeply insightful document titled 07 Spiritual Disciplines 101.pdf.
It's quite the read.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to completely reframe how you view these habits.
We want to abandon that whole concept of legalistic checklists.
Yes, the exhausting chores. Instead, we're looking at the actual mechanics of how these practices act as life-giving rhythms.
Which is just such a necessary pivot right now. Because, let's face it, we live in a reality where human attention is literally the most monetized commodity on Earth.
Yes, everywhere.
We are swimming in an ocean of engineered distraction. And the fundamental truth we have to confront is that if we don't deliberately form our spiritual habits...
the algorithms will do it for us.
Exactly. The algorithms, the culture, the sheer velocity of modern life, they will absolutely form them for us.
Right.
It's never a question of whether you are being shaped. It's only a question of what is doing the shaping.
And that leads to a premise from the text that really, it just stopped me in my tracks when I was preparing for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if the absolute greatest threat to a person's faith isn't some spectacular moral failure?
Right, or a massive earth-shattering crisis of doubt.
Exactly. What if the greatest threat is just quiet, unnoticed drift?
Okay, let's unpack this because drift is such an insidious concept.
It really is.
It doesn't happen overnight, does it?
Not at all. Drift never announces itself with a megaphone. It is incredibly subtle. It creeps up on you.
Yeah, and it almost always begins with the very best of intentions. You know, you might start a new year or a new season with this vibrant passion, this deep conviction to stay connected to your faith.
Like a New Year's resolution.
Right. But then adult life just accelerates. Work responsibilities compound. Family logistics take over.
The daily grind.
Exactly. And without a deliberate structural rhythm, you slowly lose traction. Prayer becomes something you only do when you're desperate.
Or community just becomes something you participate in when it's convenient on a Sunday morning.
And before you realize what's happened, a faith that used to feel robust and deeply rooted begins to feel dangerously thin.
But when we talk about fixing that drift, I feel like we immediately hit a wall with the vocabulary itself.
The word discipline.
Yes. The moment you say the word discipline, people instinctively recoil. I know I do.
It has a heavy connotation.
You hear discipline and you immediately think of like waking up at 4 in the morning, taking an ice cold shower and punishing yourself into compliance.
Boot camp.
Right. How do we get past that psychological friction?
It's all about looking at the linguistic root. The text points out that the word discipline shares its absolute core origin with the word disciple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with apprenticeship.
Apprenticeship. I like that.
If you're an apprentice to a master carpenter, you don't practice cutting joints to punish yourself.
You do it to learn the grain of the wood.
Exactly. You do it to become like the master.
So it's a shift from performance to proximity.
Completely.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If I start rigidly tracking my daily spiritual habits, doesn't that inherently pull me right back into a legalistic mindset? Like, how is this not just building a religious resume?
That is the exact tightrope we are walking here. And understanding the difference between legalism and true spiritual formation is crucial.
How does the text differentiate them?
Well, legalism is that quiet, insidious voice whispering, if I practice these disciplines, God will accept me.
So making it conditional.
Right. It makes your habits the currency you use to buy divine approval.
Transactional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But true formation flips that completely upside down. Formation says, because God has already accepted me, I practice these disciplines to be near him.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Legalism is obsessed with measuring compliance, which naturally produces chronic anxiety.
Because you can never measure up.
Right. But formation is focused on cultivating intimacy, which produces actual transformation.
That reminds me of the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector in Luke 18.
A perfect example.
We usually focus on the Pharisee's arrogance, right?
Yeah,
But what's really fascinating is looking at his habits. His disciplines were practically
he
flawless.
was doing everything right on paper.
He was fasting, he was giving away a tenth of everything, but he was using those habits as a resume.
Yeah, he stood there presenting his flawless track record as his ticket into heaven.
While the tax collector just beat his chest and pleaded for mercy, the fasting and the giving weren't the problem at
It
all.
was the hard posture.
It was entirely transactional. So if you're listening to this right now, I'd encourage you to audit your own internal monologue.
That's a good challenge.
Do your daily habits feel like a heavy burden you're forced to carry? Or do they feel like a life you're being invited to inhabit?
And this brings up a tension that so many people get paralyzed by.
The grace versus effort debate.
Exactly.
Hmm.
There is this false dichotomy where people think, well, if salvation is by grace alone, shouldn't putting in all this intense personal effort imply that I'm slipping back into legalism?
Right, it feels contradictory. If the work is already done, why am I sweating over a daily routine?
What's fascinating here is how the Apostle Paul handled this exact paradox. In his letter to the Philippians, he writes this incredibly nuanced directive.
What does he say?
He says, "Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you."
He holds both realities together.
He does. The text emphasizes that grace opposes earning, but it absolutely does not oppose effort.
Earning is about attitude, but effort is about action.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And historical figures like John Calvin and Martin Luther understood this deeply.
Oh, Luther had that famous rule, right?
He did. He noted that on his incredibly busy days, the days where his schedule was completely overwhelmed, he had to pray more, not less.
That is so counterintuitive.
He didn't view prayer as a task to check off his to-do list. He viewed it as the engine that powered everything else.
They completely understood that grace empowers our effort rather than eliminating the need for it.
Exactly.
Which brings us to an analogy from the text that I think perfectly visualizes this architecture of grace. The trellis.
Such a great metaphor.
If you've ever tried to grow tomatoes or any kind of vine, you know that the plant holds a tremendous amount of potential for growth and life.
Right.
But if it doesn't have a structure, a trellis to climb, what happens?
It just sprawls out along the ground.
It gets tangled in the mud, it gets attacked by pests, and its growth is severely stunted.
It needs support.
Exactly. Spiritual disciplines are not ladders we build to climb up and reach God. They're simply the trellises that support and direct the growth He has already initiated in us.
I love that.
Yeah.
And alongside the trellis, the document introduces this equally brilliant concept of the waterfall.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and geek out on this one.
I have to. Imagine standing near a massive, thunderous waterfall. You didn't create the current. You certainly can't manufacture the water.
The water represents divine grace.
Right. But what you do have complete control over is where you choose to stand.
Okay.
You can stand 50 yards away and stay completely dry, or you can take a step forward and position yourself directly underneath the cascade.
Position yourself. That's the key.
Yes, spiritual habits are merely positioning mechanisms. They intentionally place you under the waterfall of grace so you can receive what is already freely flowing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if we look at Jesus as the ultimate architect of this kind of life, we have to ask a very logical, almost uncomfortable question.
Which is-
If the Son of God was fully divine, why on earth did he need to practice spiritual habits? Why did he need a trellis?
It is a profound question, and the answer is embedded in the specific phrasing used by the gospel writers.
Like in Luke.
Yes, specifically Luke 5:16. It says, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed.
Often withdrew.
Yes, and the Greek tense used in that passage implies an imperfect, habitual, repeatedly occurring action. It wasn't a one-off event.
It wasn't just crisis management.
Exactly. He wasn't retreating because he was having a sudden breakdown or an emergency. This was intentional daily spiritual architecture. He practiced a strict rhythm of withdrawal.
And the sequence of his life completely redefines how we think about productivity today. It proves that intimacy has to precede impact.
Say more about that.
Well, think about the timeline. At his baptism, before Jesus performed a single miracle, before he preached a sermon or healed anyone, the Father spoke and declared him to be the beloved Son.
Identity before activity.
Exactly. His identity was entirely secured before his public activity even began.
And pay attention to when he chose to engage in these disciplines. The text points out that Jesus prayed through the entire night before making the major decision to choose the 12 apostles.
Wow. An entire night.
And even more telling is what he did after the massive, highly visible success of feeding the 5,000.
Right. The crowds wanted to make him king.
He had peak momentum, peak visibility, and what did he do?
He walked away.
He withdrew to a mountain by himself. The visibility and the success actually intensified his need for withdrawal.
That is wildly countercultural. I mean, if any of us had 5,000 people showing up to hear us speak, we'd immediately launch a podcast network and start selling merchandise.
We definitely capitalize on momentum. We don't retreat from it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the contrast is staggering. In our modern culture, we prize visibility above almost everything else.
We value scale, platform, relentless output.
But this historical model insists that it is the hidden life that actually sustains the public life.
Which explains the epidemic of burnout today.
We are constantly trying to exhale. We try to produce, to manage our image, to fulfill our mission without ever stopping to inhale through communion and silence.
The inhale and exhale analogy is perfect. You literally cannot survive if you only exhale.
You'll pass out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But let's get incredibly practical here.
Yes, please.
We can't just leave this as abstract theology. How do we actually build the trellis? Because the concepts are great, but Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. is a chaotic reality.
So what are the actual pathways? The document outlines 4, right?
There are 4 core relational pathways that act as the primary structures. The first pathway is prayer.
Okay.
But we have to redefine prayer. It is not about giving an uninformed God a status update on your life.
Right. My default prayer life often sounds like a drive-through order. Hey, I need this fixed. Please bless this meeting. Keep everyone healthy. Amen.
It becomes entirely self-centered.
It does.
The text calls prayer structured freedom, meant to align our will with His. And that's where utilizing a structure like the ACTS model is so transformative.
ACTS. Break that down for us.
It stands for adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication.
Training wheels for intimacy.
Exactly. Notice that supplication, the act of asking for things, is deliberately placed at the very end.
That's intentional.
Very. By the time you spend time adoring the divine character, confessing your own blind spots, and genuinely expressing gratitude, your mindset is completely reoriented.
The things you thought you desperately needed to ask for probably seem much less urgent once you've calibrated your perspective.
Precisely. Now, the second pathway is Scripture.
Which is fundamentally about rewriting the narrative of your own mind.
Yes, and the push here is to move beyond what the text calls a superficial devotional glance.
You know, reading a random verse out of context just to feel inspired for 5 minutes.
We've all done it. But the approach should be inductive Bible study.
Which sounds academic, but it's actually just 3 very logical steps.
Right. First, observation. What does the text actually say? Second, interpretation. What did this mean to the original audience?
And third, application. How do I respond to this truth today?
That middle step, interpretation and context, changes absolutely everything.
The document uses Philippians as an example, doesn't it?
It does. Paul repeatedly commands his readers to rejoice and have joy.
If you read that out of context, it sounds like toxic positivity. It sounds like a bumper sticker.
But when you apply interpretation and remember the historical reality that Paul was writing those words while physically chained to a guard in a cold, damp Roman prison, facing possible execution.
Suddenly, the gravity of what he is saying about joy becomes profound.
It ceases to be a platitude and becomes a testament to an unshakable reality.
I love that. Okay, the third pathway is worship, specifically corporate worship.
The goal here is the reorientation of the soul.
Because it's so easy today to just stay home, stream a highly polished sermon on your TV, and call it a day.
Very easy.
Mm-hmm.
But physically gathering together does something essential. It dethrones the subtle idols of the heart.
Faith was never intended to be a solo, highly individualized project.
Which naturally blurs right into the fourth pathway. Fellowship or growing in community.
Because isolation is the perfect environment for self-deception.
And that stunts your growth.
Yeah.
Community acts as an accelerator. If you look at the historical account in Acts chapter 2, those early believers weren't just attending a weekly service.
What were they doing?
They were sharing their meals, pooling their economic resources, and carrying each other's heavy burdens.
Real life together.
Fellowship provides critical accountability. It acts as a relational mirror.
Because we all have blind spots, and by definition, we cannot see them ourselves.
We desperately need trusted people in our lives to lovingly point out where our actions don't match our claimed beliefs.
Okay, so we have these four robust pathways: prayer, scripture, worship, and fellowship.
Right.
But let's bring it down to the ground level. I know there are listeners thinking, I have a demanding job, I have kids, I have a long commute, I do not have 2 hours a day to become a monk.
Nobody does.
So how do we actually build this rhythm into an overwhelmingly busy day without failing by Wednesday?
This is where we have to merge deep theology with the practical science of habit formation.
Okay, hit me with the science.
You don't need 2 hours. The most sustainable template from the text is a focused 15-minute daily devotional.
Just 15 minutes.
Just 15. Here is the breakdown. Minutes 1 to 3 are exclusively for centering. No talking, no reading.
Just silence.
Yes. Taking deep breaths, slowing your heart rate, and intentionally acknowledging the present moment.
Okay.
Minutes 4 to 8 are dedicated to Scripture. You take a short passage, maybe just a paragraph, observe the themes using that inductive method we talked about.
Got it. What's next?
Minutes 9 to 12 are for prayer, walking through the ACTS model. And finally, minutes 13 to 15 are for reflection.
That's where you write something down.
Yes, journal one single insight you gained and one specific actionable step you can take that day.
15 minutes is brilliant because the barrier to entry is so low. But to actually make it stick, you have to look at the psychology of habits.
We're talking about the classic loop of cue, routine, and reward.
You have to tie this new 15-minute routine to an existing anchor in your day.
Because if you try to just find the time, you never will.
Never. But if you say, the moment I start the coffee maker, that is my cue to sit down in the chair with my Bible.
You are piggybacking on a habit you already flawlessly execute.
And equally critical is environment design.
Right.
We mentioned earlier that attention is a highly monetized commodity.
It is also a theological resource.
Yes. Where you place your focus dictates the shape of your soul. You have to ruthlessly protect those 15 minutes.
I can personally attest to this. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with my coffee, fully intending to have a quiet moment, and my phone buzzes with a work email.
And it's over.
I glance at it, and suddenly, my 15 minutes of sacred silence has instantly transformed into 15 minutes of stressing out about a Tuesday afternoon marketing meeting.
The physical environment dictates the mental outcome?
Absolutely. Leave the phone in another room entirely. Silence the smartwatch.
Right.
Create a designated physical space in your home that is only used for this purpose.
And to build consistency, the text suggests utilizing a simple 30-day tracker.
Mark an X on the calendar for every day you complete the 15 minutes.
But wait, if we are marking X's on a calendar, aren't we right back to the legalistic checklist?
That's their point.
Like, what happens when I inevitably miss a day or 3 days in a row?
This raises an important question, and it is where most people abandon the entire process.
The pitfalls.
Yes, we have to address the pitfalls, and the most dangerous one is perfectionism.
How so?
You have to shift your mindset to realize that missing a day is just feedback. It is not a failure.
Okay.
If you miss a day, you don't need to do 30 minutes the next day to pay God back. You just resume the rhythm without guilt.
Because grace sustains discipline, but shame will completely suffocate it.
The tracker is for awareness, not indictment.
The second major pitfall to watch out for is burnout.
Oh, this happens so often.
Sometimes we get so overzealous that we try to incorporate fasting, an hour of prayer, and intense study all at once.
Overcommitting drains the joy out of the devotion entirely.
This is why incorporating genuine rest, like a Sabbath, is framed not as a sign of weakness, but as an absolute spiritual necessity.
Even a fire needs oxygen and space between the logs to keep burning.
That's a great image. And the third pitfall is comparison.
Especially in the era of social media.
It is so easy to look at someone else's beautifully curated morning routine on Instagram or their profound theological insights and feel like you are failing.
You have to measure your progress against your own yesterday.
Not against the perceived spiritual maturity of someone else's highlight reel.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this deep dive in for a landing.
Sure.
The overarching narrative we've uncovered today from the source material is that spiritual disciplines are not a resume you are trying to build to impress heaven.
Not at all.
They are the quiet, often unseen architecture of a growing soul. They are the trellises that give your faith structure.
And when practiced with an understanding of grace, these habits take your spiritual life and transform it from a chaotic series of exhausting, unpredictable emotional spikes.
Into a steady, enduring flame.
My final encouragement to anyone listening is simply to start incredibly small.
Resist the urge to overhaul your entire existence by tomorrow morning.
15 faithful, focused minutes a day, executed consistently over a year, will shape the trajectory of your life far more profoundly than occasional sporadic bursts of intense but exhausting spirituality.
Consistency always beats intensity. Always. I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over today as you go back to your routines.
Let's hear it.
Human beings are, by our very nature, creatures of habit. That means you are already practicing a strict rule of life every single day.
Wow.
It just might be a rule of life authored by your smartphone's push notifications, or by your chronic daily anxieties, or by your overbooked calendar.
That's challenging.
If you were to sit down right now and do an honest audit of your daily automatic reflexes, what invisible monastery of modern culture have you unknowingly pledged your devotion to?
Such a good question.
And more importantly, what would it actually look like for you to consciously hand in your resignation to that monastery today?
Resign today. I love that.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that 15 minutes, start building your trellis, and deliberately position yourself under the waterfall of grace today.